Sometimes artists pass away due to health problems, overdoses, and other non-violent factors. However, much more frequently, rappers meet their end at the hands of other rappers. For instance, in places like Chicago, it's as if a civil war is ongoing, a conflict that started long ago and shows no signs of ending. But the bloodiest feud, one that claimed the lives of not only artists but also ordinary residents of the ghetto, is the conflict between the Crips and the Bloods, the Blues and the Reds. Almost everyone knows about this rivalry, as it has become part of the cultural code, and in hip-hop, this war holds a significant place. Today, I'd like to specifically discuss this famous and extremely bloody rivalry. Well then, let's get started. The Crips were the first to emerge. Los Angeles in the 1960s was a place where a black teenager from a poor family was unlikely to find success. Mass unemployment, the inability to receive a quality education, and discrimination pushed young people of color to the streets, forcing them to fight for their place in the sun. On a spring evening in 1969, unusual guests arrived for 16-year-old high schooler Stanley Williams, also known as Tookie. He was an aspiring bodybuilder, an experienced street fighter, and the leader of a small gang. He had recently been released from prison after a short stint for car theft. The leader of a local youth gang, Raymond Washington, and his friends proposed an alliance with Williams and his crew to combat other factions. Washington and Williams immediately took a liking to each other. The outcome of the conversation left both satisfied. Raymond secured Tookie's support, and Tookie got a chance to fulfill his long-standing dream to become the leader of the biggest and most powerful gang in the world. The new alliance was named the Crips. From the very beginning, the Crips were surrounded by a romantic aura, which they carefully cultivated, crafting an image of modern-day Robin Hoods, champions of the rights of oppressed black individuals. The mysterious acronym was deciphered in various ways: Resources of the Community for Independent People, Collective Revolution in Progress, and even Community Revolutionary Interparty Service. Williams later claimed that the Crips were envisioned as the successors of the famous Black Panthers. In reality, it was much simpler. The name either originated from a journalist's mistaken transcription of the gang's name, Washington Avenue Cribs, or from the nickname Cripples given to the gang members by local residents due to their distinctive limping gait. Their fight against the regime didn't materialize. While the Black Panthers pursued political objectives, the main goal of the Crips was to establish control over the streets of Los Angeles. In their efforts to clear their territory of rivals, the Crips operated extremely ruthlessly, often going to extremes. For instance, they beat a student named Robert Ballou to death simply because he refused to remove a leather jacket that the Crips believed only they had the right to wear. They managed to intimidate many, but for others, this only fueled resentment. Small gangs, in an attempt to evade destruction, formed their own alliance, which they named the Bloods. The Crips viewed the new adversaries with contempt. Soon, as a demonstration of who ruled the city, a group of Crips members killed one of the Bloods in June 1972. In retaliation, the Bloods shot the killer's friends. This marked the beginning of the war. On February 27, 1973, Tookie Williams's right-hand man, 16-year-old Curtis Morrow, known as Buddha, got into a minor altercation on the street. It was a trap. His opponent turned out to be from the Bloods, and a support group was nearby. Buddha ended up bleeding to death on the asphalt. Even the Crips themselves, who feared and disliked Morrow, he was cruel, bloodthirsty, unpredictable, and only answered to Tookie, considered him one of their own. A crowd of thousands gathered for his funeral, and every Crip wore a blue bandana on their head, just like Buddha did. Both gangs have their own set of specific traditions. For instance, the Crips prefer not to use the letter combination CK in writing, associating it with Creep Killer, and replace it with CC. They also try to avoid using the letter B whenever possible, changing it to BK, Blood Killer. In turn, the Bloods try to eliminate words starting with the letter C, turning, for example, coffee into boffy. The Crips traditionally call each other Kaz and Blood Killers, while their opponents simply refer to each other as Bloods. On the streets of American cities, you can see graffiti with the letter B crossed out or with a cross inside, as members of rival groups attempt to offend each other. Both are structured on the same principle, representing umbrella structures that include numerous sets, often united by nothing more than their allegiance to the alliance. These sets often feud with each other, only making peace when they need to confront a common enemy. Of course, all African American gangs have strong ties to hip-hop, as both subcultures developed concurrently, borrowing much from one another. One of the most prominent representatives of the Crips is Snoop Dogg, for whom blue became almost a trademark color.
Listen to the words that I speak as I take me a drink to the middle of the street and get to my...
Many members of Death Row belonged to the Bloods. For example, their leader was Suge Knight. Tupac was also involved with the gang, but to say he was a regular member of the Bloods might not be accurate.
Nosy people get it too. When you see me spit at you, you know I'm trying to get rid of you. Yeah. Yeah, I know it's pitiful.
Illegal substances play a special role in the lives of gangs. Until the early 1980s, neither the Bloods nor the Crips got involved in this business, preferring to stay away from white powder. However, by 1983, the Bloods, known for their brutality that had lasted for over 10 years but were getting squeezed on all fronts, turned to the drug trade in search of salvation. They made a successful move, taking over the market. The rivalry between the two groups, which had previously been confined to the streets of Los Angeles, spilled beyond its borders. The Bloods and the Crips, in search of new markets, spread across the country. New gangs from all corners of the USA declared their allegiance to one or the other group, adding Crips or Blood to their names and joining the Great War. The feud even reached the East Coast. Two major alliances of African-American criminals, People's Nation and Folk Nation, formed alliances with rival Los Angeles groups. Drugs promised big money, which meant that disputes were conducted on an adult level, with automatic weapons and grenades. The market stabilized in the 1990s when both gangs reached an agreement with the Mexican cartel Sinaloa. For the Mexicans, this meant a guaranteed distribution network, and for the Bloods and the Crips, a reliable supplier. In America, of course, the customs are softer than south of the border. Clashes between rivals rarely end with dozens of bodies, a mere trifle compared to what happens in Mexico, where people are shot in entire villages and heads are severed by the police. We covered this in our video about the MS-13 gang, which you can watch. However, even the Mexican bandits, accustomed to brutality, were still surprised by how the Crips and Bloods often kill each other indiscriminately. Therefore, they sometimes stopped collaborating with them, as they drew too much police attention. Almost all leaders from the first wave on both sides are already deceased. The last one, Stanley Tookie Williams, who was sentenced to death but became a humanist and children's author in prison, was executed in 2005. However, their legacy lives on. Currently, by the most modest estimates, both groups have between 30,000 to 35,000 members nationwide, not counting their allies. With them, their forces can reach hundreds of thousands. These gangs include not only Africans but also Latinos, Chinese, and even Caucasians. Both organizations have stable sources of income. Both train their fighters. Even within the ranks of the US military, both have become part of American gangster rap culture. Their exploits are celebrated by the group Bloods and Crips, which includes active members from both groups. Today, the rivalry between the Bloods and Crips can even be observed among American freshmen. Just consider the conflict between Snoop Dogg and Tekashi. While, as we've already discussed, Snoop has long aligned himself with the Crips, Tekashi was recently part of the 9 Trey Bloods set. However, he's now an enemy to them too, as he cooperated with the authorities and betrayed his accomplices. Another significant milestone was the murder of Crips member Nipsey Hussle, which many refer to as another turning point in the war between the factions.
It's never enough to console her. Tell her your daddy a soldier. She needs you right now in this moment.
And that's it for today. What are your thoughts on this gang war? Share your opinion in the comments, give us a like, and subscribe to the channel. Goodbye, everyone.